About death, nothing is born that at some point that something does not die, and this is not something that is negotiable or can be considered having some other interpretation. It is completely clear. Whatever is born dies. Man now is a different story, but finally he follows the same law. There is the moment of birth and the moment of death. The moment of birth may not be completely clear. Many say it is when conception occurs. Still others say it is when the infant takes its first breath. Of course, there are other interpretations. But somewhere between conception and the first breath is when the person begins his life. And at some point, there is death. But he is not clear either, because from the moment the person stops breathing until the moment his body ceases to exist, there is some time, and somewhere in between, in this period, there is also the moment of actual death. But death is something that will happen. As a human being, he is symbiotic, that is to say, composed of organs. Those are composed of cells, which change every few years. They are replaced by others, and these by others, but they keep the human alive for a much longer period than their life. But death will eventually come. And the question is very simple. Is there anything after death? The answer is determined by the determination of what dies. Something is definitely dying. That something that dies does not persist after death. And this, in my opinion, is his body, which has not only a simple material existence, but carries three forms. That is to say, it carries an intellect, it carries a sensation, and it also carries a material form. That is the spirit, the soul, and the matter that has taken as raw materials and has created a form. It is this form that will cease to exist, and whatever that form carries will be extinguished, and will exist nowhere and for no one. The raw materials will be returned to the warehouse from which they were originally received, cleaned, and made available again for the continuation of life. Hence, the entirety of our mental existence, encompassing every thought and belief that we hold, will eventually cease to exist and be completely extinguished following our passing. Whatever is in our soul will again cease to exist, and it will be extinguished. It is commonly acknowledged and easily embraced that our body operates in this manner. Our body will melt. It will become dynamic energy again and be absorbed by the earth. This is the fate of man's individuality. It starts from the moment of birth and ends at the moment of death. And now we come to the essence of the matter. Is there life after death resulting from that we said? I would say yes, there is. That which continues to exist is that which was not born at the moment we consider man to be born. It pre-existed in another dimension of consciousness. It descended as a higher state of existence, settled in human existence, and used it for its own purposes. When the time comes, when everything is finished, simply it is freed and returns to the higher point from which it came, to the higher level of consciousness. This, the something different, lives the individuality of man in its own way, and has the ability to exploit the course of individuality from birth to death in order to gain its own lesson. Man, therefore, is bi-existent. He has one existence at the level of individuality and a second existence at the level of personality, that is, in this higher ego that is within him. What the act of creation asks to be done is to be able, during life, to pass the center of gravity of his being from individuality to this higher plane. So, when he reaches the point of death of his material form, to be able with this passage to carry the knowledge of the individuality of life, and not the totality of knowledge, but simply the quintessence of knowledge. This is precisely the ticket that will enable this spark to claim something more at the higher level from which it has descended like a ray. When it returns there, it will not be something that will have carried individuality. It had appropriated it as a mode of operation when it was inside the human and living in the here and now. There it will not have this, but it will have a memory or a better knowledge of the concept of individuality. This is the great stake of the life we live, just to be able to transfer this information of separateness as knowledge to the above level of consciousness. This level is characterized by collectivity and unity. Death is when this process ends, and the duration of death is the least amount of time we are given to make this transfer of this information from individuality to this particular ego on the plane above. This is what the initiatory field, with the elements it has, tries to offer as knowledge to man. It prepares him so that he does not have a problem at that moment to make this simple transition. In other words, this transition is to be correctly completed, and it has to be known for a long time. Someone who doesn't believe in anything at all will live in this state anyway. He will have, in the short time allotted to him from the moment he closes his eyes until the process is over, to complete this act, which will be completely new to him. And don't ask how long this period is, because I don't know. Of course, in order to execute it, he must have gained the information that will give him this possibility. If he does not have this information, no matter what he does, he cannot complete this movement, this act, this transference. And, while up to that moment he has been living in a dual state, at the moment of death, he will be extinguished from both levels. The duality will cease to exist for that individual on both levels. And all this, regardless of whether he had managed to pass the center of gravity of his being to this higher level and was constantly functioning on the lower level of individuality. But let's see what will happen if he has lived his life correctly, something that can be said easily but is difficult to accomplish. Then, at this moment of separation, when individuality as a substance is extinguished, the information of this level of individuality will enrich the second substance, which was never born, but that was projected like a ray. And now the moment came to be absorbed from its origin and to carry the information to other levels of consciousness, and that is actual death. Many times we call this a second death, and I do not know how else. However, this is how life is completed, and through the process of death, either the person passes into the other state, or is completely erased and deleted from everywhere as life information. All that remains is in people's memory, which means nothing since memory also fades over the years, and no one gains anything by being recorded in history. He himself as existence will cease to exist or will exist as life information, only somewhere else. But it will have nothing to do with the information of the life he leaves behind. All that data will do at best is to be absorbed by humanity, and perhaps that way he will help other units of humanity on their own journey into existence. This is the way.